Welcome back to our last session for the afternoon, which is on gender, governance, and leadership. I'm joined today by an eminent panel. We have Alicia Mangalji. Alicia has an MBA from Said Business School and manages the renovations and repositioning of new hotel acquisitions for her family business, Westmont Hospitality. We have Alan Mack, MP. Alan is Member of Parliament for Havant constituency. After completing law at Cambridge, Alan went on to work with Clifford Chance, and in 2010, he was awarded Young City Lawyer of the Year. Alan is the first person of Chinese origin to be elected to the House of Commons. We have with us Atul Pathak. Atul is one of the UK's most successful franchise entrepreneurs, running 29 McDonald's restaurants across London and Berkshire, employing more than 2,500 staff who serve 18 million customers a year. And finally, we have Sanjay Arora. Sanjay holds an MBA from Regent's Business School and a degree in business management from Royal Holloway. He began his career at KPMG in 2013, working in a variety of positions, and today he works in the family business Arora Group. Welcome all. Coming back to our topic for the afternoon, gender, governance, leadership. I have permission from the Dean to speak freely, so I will. Today in the UK, we have a female Prime Minister. We have a woman who's President of our Supreme Court. And we have a female running the biggest police service in the country. While these are impressive achievements, we cannot assume that they reflect fundamental change or that there is gender parity in the world. Last year, the most powerful nation in the world chose not to elect a female president. In fact, only 15 of the world's leaders are women. Let's put this another way. Just 10% of the 193 members of the United Nations represent a female leader. There has been progress, certainly there has. In the UK, we have significantly increased the number of MPs, the number of judges, and even the number of vice chancellors. However, in business, things have moved at a snail's pace. Only 6 of the FTSE 100 CEOs or board members are women. In fact, women make up only 21% of senior roles in businesses in the UK. This is an Asian family business conference. That figure of 21% compares rather unfavorably with countries like the Philippines, Indonesia, and China, where women in senior roles occupy over 30% of all positions in businesses. A wealth of management research studies demonstrates that having women in leadership roles, it makes economic sense for business. Companies with more women in leadership roles have been found to increase focus on corporate governance, on corporate responsibility, talent dynamics, and market equity. Yet the pace of change is very slow. So to kick off this session, my first question for the panel, drawing on your own experiences, are Asian family businesses merely mirroring the situation in the corporate world, or are they actually better placed to promote gender diversity? Atul.
Well, firstly, I would say that I'm very fortunate to have a very good gender mix in my own business. So since we spoke last Luna, I have acquired a few more restaurants, so my workforce has risen to 3,000. And the last time we checked, I have 51% of my staff are female staff and 49 male. Now, everybody has something to offer, and therefore it's very important that we employ people on their ability. And gender equality becomes a part of it because if you have a team or a board comprised mainly of male members, then we are missing something. And if you flip it the other way, if there's a board comprised mainly of female members, then you are losing another perspective. So I think gender equality is very, very important for any business. But having said that, I think it's also important to note that we must not just pay a lip service to gender equality and just talk about it and not do anything about it. So as I said, I'm very proud to have a gender equality in my business. But there's another side to it, which is very important, is that sometimes we have pressures of bringing gender equality. And when that happens, and a lot of corporate businesses are really stuck on data they need to show to their shareholders, or I have a gender equality, or I'm really actively working on gender equality. The problem happens in that way is that when you are merely chasing a target, then what happens is you can make positive discrimination. So if you have, for example, if there's an organization looking to increase the female members of staff in his organization, and a really able male member comes, the male member will be at a disadvantage because the company is looking to employ more female members. So it is counterproductive. So in my opinion, yes, gender equality is very important. And in family businesses, we do not chase numbers because we don't have many shareholders to report to. So it works much better naturally. But we've got to be careful that if you're chasing just a number to do a tick box exercise, so we are not leaving able people unelected to your business, and your business will suffer as a result.
Thank you. I would echo. I think gender equality is very, very important. And I'm not sure there is a big difference between family businesses and other corporations. I think it depends on the type of business that you're in. For example, we are essentially a private equity firm who has operational expertise in hotels. So we have an operations arm and we have sort of an investment arm. And turnover at our company is very low. And I think that's quite a common characteristic of family businesses. And I think, on the operations side of the business, we have many general managers who are women. And on the investment side, I would say that we only have a handful of women at director levels. And I think that's for two reasons. I think one, like I said, turnover is low. So the people that have been at the business have been there for many years, some for 20, some for 30 years, that have worked alongside my father. And at that time, it was much more common for men to join a private equity firm. So, as these guys start to retire and maybe move on, I think we will start to see more women join our company. Yes.
So this was a hard one to answer because it really depends on what the type of Asian family business is and what their interests are. But if I take the view on our own business, actually, funny enough, when I got the questions through this morning from Luna's colleague, I had a good walk around our head office, and actually, there's probably more women than men, actually. So that made me quite happy. And it just shows that in Asian family businesses, the hierarchy, I would say, is more of a flat structure, whereas when you look at a corporate business, it's much more steep, i.e. decision makers are right at the top. It's much, much harder to make any sort of change. But I would say within Asian family businesses, it's much easier to do that. We certainly there's a couple of decision makers who are family board members who can make very, very quick decisions, but that's not the point. It's about who has the better skill set. Whatever gender they are, male or female, it just depends on who fits the role best. That's the way that we've always played it. It's great having other panel board members who have more women than men, but then that just means that probably they're better at doing that job than a male is. It just really depends on what sort of business you are undertaking on a daily basis.
Thank you, Luna, and thank you for inviting me. It's a great pleasure to be with you all this afternoon, to be on a panel with such fantastic entrepreneurs. Coming from an Asian family business background myself, I certainly share the views of my fellow panelists. I think family businesses generally are more agile, less hierarchical, more flexible, and certainly more collegiate. That's the nature of a family after all. So I think that family businesses in general have a huge advantage over corporate structures, which often tend to be quite inflexible. I think from an Asian perspective, having come up through the ranks of my own family's business, I think we are good at promoting women. I think of my own mother and my own sister who are involved in our business, and I think when you're with family, it's a different emotional equation than if you're just with fellow employees. So I think other businesses in other sectors can learn from Asian family business, and I'm delighted to be on this panel with so many great Asian family entrepreneurs. But I also agree with Alicia, who said it does vary by sector. There are some sectors where the role of women is notoriously not as where it should be. I think construction, certain other sectors, whereas hospitality tends to have more women. So I think there's a sector-by-sector analysis to be done as well. But I think Asian family businesses are certainly very good role models for the corporate world when it comes to empowering and helping women to get to the top, not just low-paid administrative roles, but actually boardroom and executive roles where decisions are made.
Thank you. At this point, would anyone in the audience like to comment on whether family businesses have the dexterity, the nimbleness to promote women in senior roles? Okay. Moving on to our second point, which is around governance. According to management research on gender leadership and governance, one of the challenges that women face in a male-dominated boardroom is that they can be ignored. They sometimes have to be more aggressive to get themselves noticed, or even take up golf or whatever else to get into the boys' network. So my second question to the panel, do you think boardrooms of family businesses are different? Are they better placed to encourage diversity, to encourage different points of view? Or actually are they quite closed places that do not encourage the recruitment of outside members? Atul?
Well, firstly, as Sanjay said, that it depends on what kind of business it is. And if it's a small family business, then obviously there's no need to have an external board members. So therefore, that negates that. But if you have a large business and you want board members, then I think the more and more businesses, family businesses, are now looking for external expertise to come in and play a part. And I think it's easier for a family business to have the gender equality in the boardroom because they can see, I can only talk from my point of view, I can see the value that the different facets of the society that can add to you. So whether it's a gender equality or whether it's people from different ethnicity or people from different walks of life. So all that really makes a boardroom much stronger because then you can have a different points of view and you can react to it. Because don't forget, your customers are not of one particular gender or one particular society. So my customers come from all walks of life. And therefore, I have to have representation of those, my customers in my boardroom as well in my employees, where my employees are from. So I always say, my employees must represent my customers because otherwise the point is lost. If my customers are coming, they don't see them represented in my restaurant, then therefore it is not really, we are not serving our customers. So therefore, I think as a businessman, a family businessman, I can make those changes very quickly rather than relying on a structure, a corporate structure, which can be very top-heavy. I have a very lean structure, so we make decisions, making decisions a lot easier, and we can make decisions much quickly. So I agree that as a family business, there's more diversity as we go along than the corporate structure.
Yeah, as we heard earlier, I think a lot of families want to keep the control within the family. And as I think as Tony said, the first generation might differ very much from the third generation family business. So I think with that in mind, you know, in our company, you know, my father started this business 40 years ago, and he is a shareholder as well as his two brothers and my grandfather. And currently, they are the only 4 people that sit on the board. So if the idea is to keep it within the family, then the only way to get diversity is to try and encourage female members of the family to join. And I think in an Asian family business specifically, that can sometimes be, you know, culturally a little difficult. In our family, I guess we come from a reasonably traditional Indian family. My grandfather worked with his father. My father worked with my grandfather and worked with his 2 brothers. So it was very much expected for my brother to join the business. I think you have to work hard to break down those barriers. And I would say, though, that once that trust is developed and once I think my father could depend on me, you know, those barriers can break down. So I think there has to be encouragement for female members of the family to join if you want to have more diversity, but keep the control within the family.
Alicia, if I may ask, is it just joining? Is it encouraging to join, but also making them feel confident that they will be heard? What's the trick to that?
You know, I think you have to, like we were saying before, you have to earn your respect. I had to work very, very hard to gain the respect of not only the family members, but also employees in the company. And I think once you've learned, and, you know, I'm still learning, you know, once you've got that, then I think you have to find ways to be heard. And sometimes that means being, you know, approaching it in a softer way. But I think there are ways to do that. But I think, you know, as I said, I'm the first of the next generation to join the business, and I'm the only woman in the business who's, you know, woman in the family who's part of the business. So we're just starting to talk about these things now, and it's a difficult thing to bring up.
So I think going back to your questions, I would say that family businesses are very different. You know, they don't embrace the same corporate culture that a FTSE 250 company would. You know, they have that flexibility. They are able to make changes quicker. There's less decision makers on the board necessarily. It all depends on what the size of the business is. In our own family business, we 100% encourage diversity because, like, it goes back to my first point, whether male or female, who is able to deliver that role better for me, for my business. I don't care what the gender is. You know, it just depends who's got the better CV, the better acumen, the better qualities, and the better experience. You know, our board is mixed. We've got 4 non-execs who sit on our board, because I was having this discussion with someone earlier that you want that outsider's experience. With Asian family businesses, what typically happens is you're sat, or especially my father sat with his blinkers on, and sometimes going forward that won't work. So you sometimes need to have an outsider, someone who will be willing to talk outside the box and tell you the truth. Because sometimes what happens within family businesses is the emotions get the better of you, and you're kind of told what to say just to make someone else happy. And I would say that, you know, when you talked about quota, I think absolutely not. Bringing in a quota, then it's just doing a tick box exercise. You know, that will eventually demotivate people, and it's not good at promoting people and diversity, in my humble opinion. And then lastly, the question that was asked was, should gender be a factor in selecting board members? Certainly not. Whoever can deliver that role and deliver it more effectively should be the person to work in your company. That's it.
Well, I think Sanjay is absolutely right that gender shouldn't be the deciding factor when you're choosing board members, nor in any other walk of life. Alicia is also right that, and I feel this from the sort of Southeast Asian community, the gravitational pull in businesses is often to gravitate towards family members, people you trust. There's certainly an instinctive distrust of outsiders. You certainly don't want other people coming in onto your business that you've worked incredibly hard to sort of build up. But I also think, and I think we're relatively young, I include Atul in that very young panel on the stage today, is that there is a generational shift as well. I think second, third, and sometimes fourth generation children have a different perspective from their parents and grandparents, because we realise the need to have professional outsiders on the board, to have professional outsiders advising us, and to understand that not every family member wants to go into the family business. And, you know, I eventually didn't go into my family business, and my parents don't think I've got a proper job at the moment. So, but I may have to go back to it, depending on how all things go. So I think that there's a huge generational shift, actually, from the views of the first generation, from whichever country you may have come from. So I think that's actually very, very positive, and I feel that actually the state of Asian family business in this country, and I meet and know many, either founders or those who work in them, is in a very, very positive state.
Thank you. Moving on to our third question. Some academics argue that the corporate world has inflexible working conditions, conditions that are not often suitable for women in executive roles, as they can involve travel or very long hours. Family responsibilities continue to be cited as reasons for females not progressing to the top or leaving the workplace altogether. So my question to the panel: are family businesses better placed to offer more family-friendly environments, or do they face the same constraints as the corporate world?
Well, I think family business has the same challenges as the corporate world. I employ a lot of female members, and I'm generally very flexible with them. So if they have challenges with their family, along their family lives, then I'm prepared to, excuse me, I'm getting a Theresa May moment at the moment. So we can...
You're getting your P45 soon then, aren't you?
That'd be great, yeah.
The stage is still intact, though. It's all fine. Yeah.
So it's very important that we need to work, because, in my opinion, female members of a team have a lot to offer, and therefore we need to work alongside with them to help them. And an example, my daughter, who's a doctor, she just had a baby, and she thought having a baby has blighted her career, in the sense that she could not go to work, so she was going to become a consultant. It had been put back by a year because she could not go to work. And then obviously at NHS, they said you have to come, you know, either 3 days or 5 days a week. And the inflexibility is there. And also because you are a female member, have a baby, you still have to do the nights. So they're very, very inflexible. Whereby in a family business, you can be flexible. And I understand the corporates have a problem, because if they are giving a latitude to certain members, then everybody else will come, a male member would come and say, well, I have children too, I look after my children too at night, so therefore why I have to do the nights and not a female member of my team. So as a family business, you can make those decisions much, much quicker rather than going through. So in a corporate world, you have to make sure it's written down in your terms and conditions, it's written down, so it's all the boxes are ticked, and it sometimes can be very cumbersome. So the family business is a lot easier, and I think it offers people a flexibility, and I think that in result help the business, because once you give flexibility to somebody, they actually put in more effort into the business, because they feel if the business is prepared to bend the rules or prepared to help them, that they will work double hard for the business. So I think overall it's a win-win situation for those family businesses who are prepared to be flexible towards their team.
Thank you. I think we've talked a little bit about some of the characteristics that most family businesses have, and one was they're less hierarchical. They often have a more informal decision-making process, and as I mentioned before, they have low turnover. So I think that in a way that family members and management sort of develop a level of trust for the people that work for them. So, for example, in our company, there's a lot of the staff have a lot of autonomy. And therefore that creates flexibility. For example, we have a director of finance who has 3 kids, and she leaves at 3 p.m. from the office, but she signs back in at 7:30, and everyone's very aware of that. So I think that because of that trust, there's more autonomy and there's more flexibility, which I think is caters to being more family friendly. I'd also like to say that in general, I think the way that we work today has changed. I think technology connects us left, right, and center, so that creates flexibility as well. And I'm hoping that the corporate world sort of moves away from the boundaries of the 9 to 6 anyway. So,
Thank you.
I think that we are all equally equipped. Doesn't matter what sort of business you're in, whether it's a family business, corporate business. I think it's just how you use your resources. We, for example, one ethos that my father has always promoted from day one of starting the business, just under 20 years ago, is we treat every single employee like a family member, and all of our guests who stay with us stay like royalty. And we have kept by that. We hold, for example, a family fun day every year. We've got just under 4,000 staff nearly working in the company. We call everyone, including all their families. We put on a barbecue. It's a really fun day out, and it gets people to mingle with the other hotels, which they may not be able to because of their work life and family life balance. And I think actually that's very important, the family life balance as well. One thing we will always say to our new recruits in the business is just have the right balance. You'll get 100% from us if you give us 100% back, but just make sure you always put your family first, the family at home, and then we are your second family. So the family at home, whether it be your mom, your dad, your sister, your son, your daughter, they come first. So make sure you always put them first, and we will come second. We had an employee, and this just goes to show that family businesses can do more. I don't know if this would happen in the corporate world, but we had a really bad accident of one of our employees recently who works at our Intercontinental Hotel at the O2. She was walking home from work. It was a winter day last year, and she was unfortunately run over by a bus, a double-decker bus, and she was under that bus for 20 minutes. Very, very sad, but one thing that we did as a family is all her family were in India, in Italy, a couple in the US as well. First thing we did was, and she's got no family in the UK, we called all of her family, flew them all over. That was us who did that. But more importantly, as the board, as a business, me and my father visited her in hospital and made sure that we were there 24/7 for her until her family came over from all sides of the continent. And that just goes to show that we do promote that family-friend environment. If someone is unwell or someone needs help, we are their family to support them just as much as their own blooded family is.
I agree with that. I think family businesses are just as well equipped as corporates, if not more so, because by definition, a family business knows the value of family. It is built around mums and dads, sisters, aunts, uncles, in our case. I think what I found is that a bigger determinant is actually size of the business. I mean, sometimes when you're small and you're just getting going or you're less well-staffed, the ability to meet industry standards when it comes to childcare or employee assistance or generosity of pension is actually much harder than when you're a larger, more successful business, when you have economies of scale, you have professional staff in HR to help you. So I think size and approach and attitude is often more important than whether it's a family or a corporate structure. But I also think Alicia's very right about family first. So Sanjay is right about being family first is very important, because I also worked in the city after leaving my own family business, and the culture there was very much sort of work first. It would come above all things, including your own personal relationships and family. And I think family businesses, particularly in the Asian community, have that very, very strong nuclear family feel, which really does, as Sanjay's just articulated, mean that you actually look out for people as members of your own sort of extended business family, rather than just seeing them as employees. So I think that sort of culture is something that can be replicated in other parts of the economy.
Thank you. That's been wonderful contribution from the panel around how family businesses are more nimble. They have value systems that underline the notion of family, and that runs through, they are better positioned to offer more family-friendly sort of environments. Any comment from the audience on the issues presented by the panel? Jason?
Thank you very much, Luna. And thanks for the panel. As a representative of the Institute of Directors, it pleases me no end that a boring topic like governance actually takes centre stage in these discussions, particularly around family business. My question's for Alicia. Now that this is this generation, your generation, moving away from the traditional way that particularly Asian family businesses view women in the boardroom and things like that, what changes are you going to make for the coming generation when it comes to diversity?
Oh, goodness. Well, you know, I think you have to be more inclusive, and you have to let other women in the family know that it's an option for them to join the business. And I think that means just creating a way for them to actually learn what the business is about. So I am the first to join, but actually I've got younger female cousins who are now interning. So I think hopefully I've broken those barriers, and other people are going to join. But in terms of diversity going forward, I mean, I think we've heard a lot about governance today, and as I said earlier, we are just starting to talk about some of those things within our family. And so I actually don't know what the future holds for the family business. I haven't spoken to my father about it, or to my uncles. So I think that's sort of first, is to understand what the main goal is. And then hopefully being a woman in that discussion, I can steer the conversation towards how do we include more women in this situation. So I'll have to maybe get back to you on that one. But I do hope that we will have more diversity going forward.
Any other comments?
Hi, I'm Charlie. I'm the VP here at the University for the Entrepreneurship Society. My question is kind of for the entire board. It's a little bit more general. It's that when conflict does unfortunately arise, how do you deal with leadership culture clashes and opposing styles of governance?
Yeah, that's very interesting. I remember many years ago, I had my wife and I were based in the same office, and I won't recommend it to anyone. So I would, an employee come to me and say, I want holiday at a certain time of the year, and I would say no. And they'll go to my wife and then and have a sob story, and my wife most probably will agree and say, yes, you can go on holiday. And suddenly the business is at a disadvantage. And then, so after a couple of years, I sat down with my wife and I said, look, we need to agree our responsibilities, and we need to really divide them so that make sure we are, so the business is like your home, your family. So sometimes your children will come to you and take advantage. If you don't give in, they'll go to mom. If mom doesn't give in, they come to dad. So in a family business, it becomes difficult because then you are family members working together, and if one person has made a decision, another person override it, it becomes very, very difficult. So, and I think in a corporate world, it's a lot easier because there's a clear demarcation of responsibilities. And I think the family businesses need to do the same thing, have a clear demarcation of responsibilities so the conflict does not arise. Because if there's a conflict, the business will suffer. And also, and I personally do not like a board member made completely of the family members. I want my board to be representative of the wider world and have more people who can give me some extra insight into my business. Outsiders looking in rather than insiders looking out. So therefore, I'm never in favor of having my entire board made up of my family members, because that will lead to conflict. And sometimes what goes on in a family politics will come into your business, and that is not very conducive to your business and does not help your business. So I'm in favor of always to have a very diverse board, whether diversity in terms of gender ratio, or even people from different walks of life and different expertise, somebody with finance, somebody with management degree, and such. So that, but end of the day, if you have one boss, then they can all feed into you, and then you can listen to everyone and make a decision, informed decision. But in a family, conflicts are very easy to happen. So therefore, it's very, very difficult to deal with a conflict if all the board members are made up of one family.
Thank you, Atul.
So I sort of wear two hats in my situation. I work 50% for the professional company, Westmore Hospitality, and I work 50% for sort of our family office, which we're just in the process of formalizing. So on one side, I'm a sort of a cog in the machine, and I actually don't work that closely with my father or other family members. And on the family office, I work very closely with my father, and I think because I am learning a lot on this side of what I do and applying a lot of that to some of the other investments that I do, you know, I listen to my father a lot. And if we have a conflict, we have a very rational conversation, and I respect what he says a lot because, you know, he's created this company and he's built this, so he clearly has a lot of good experience. And if I disagree, we just have a very rational conversation about it. So I don't think we've had, you know, at least in my experience, had those conflicts quite yet because I'm not at a board level. But I think it is about respect, and it's about understanding that we're all on the same page and we all want the same thing. And you have this, you know, when you work for your family, you have this huge sense of responsibility because you're not working for an outside company. So we're all on the same page, and so the conversations are usually reasonably rational, and you have to pick your fights.
I think the most important thing as well for me is picking the right moment. I mean, for me, it's more about, you know, leading by example and being accommodating to your staff's needs, to the board's needs, to your father's needs. You know, working in a family business is not the easiest thing in the world. Put my hands up. You know, I worked in the corporate environment, and then I came back to the family business. Very, very different. Very, very different. But it's more about, you know, also because they are the first generation, they're the ones who nurtured this baby right from a toddler all the way up to where it is now, a 20-year-old adult, in a sense, in my business. You have to listen to their needs and wants to prevent any conflict. But then, with me and my father, we have a very healthy debate. We close the door, we get on our boxing gloves, and we talk it out. I think one thing that prevents conflict from happening, of course, there's conflict in all Asian businesses, in all businesses actually in the world. I think is just being honest and acting with integrity. I think that's with that equation, you can't go wrong. You know, I've always been very honest. One thing that my father's always taught me is, if you do something very, very bad, if you make a mistake, don't worry, son. You've made that mistake. Just make new ones. So that I don't make many mistakes because I don't want to get too much in trouble. But he's always brought me up with those kind of morals and you know, being honest, talking from the heart, and just, you know, talking. It doesn't matter whoever you talk to in the company, just being honest and just being yourself, because I know that sometimes people will portray that they're one person and then they're another person in front of, you know, maybe a CEO or a board member, but just being yourself always makes life much, much easier and prevents conflict.
Well, my extension to those points which Sanjay and Lisha have made, and Atul, which are great, is simply that you have to tackle it. I think in a family business, and you're with family members, I've been in situations where you wonder whether you're talking to your dad or you're talking to another business person, and that's often something that you have to tackle every time you go into any sort of conversation. But actually, you have to realise that for the good of the business and for the good of all the other people that work there, you do have to address it in a professional way, and rather than just sort of as family members do, sort of just let things fester and, you know, hope they'll go away and all that sort of stuff. And maybe that's just my own experience, but actually tackling it head on, doing what Sanjay said, which is really being upfront about it, talking it out, is by far the best way of conflict resolution in this context.
Thank you. And that leads us nicely into a question on leadership, which was touched on earlier during the afternoon. Do family businesses encourage a different or more authentic style of leadership? Or is it more challenging to be truly yourself in that environment, particularly if you're from the second generation? I think someone earlier commented that people had been in the business for a good 30 years. It's hard to make yourself heard. Atul?
Well, first of all, to be a leader, you have to have a good shadow of the leader. So if you're running a business, you must know everything about your business. You cannot lead if you cannot do. So before I started McDonald's, I had to go through 9 months training. And during 9 months, I had to learn how to cook burgers, how to serve customers, how to clean toilets. So when I was learning, and I thought, hang on a minute, I'm going to be owning the business. I won't be serving burgers. I won't be cooking burgers. Why am I learning this? And having done that, I really appreciate spending every minute I did during those 9 months. Because when I walk through my restaurant, my kitchens, if my employees do something right, I can stop and appreciate them, give them a pat on the back. If they do something wrong, I can correct them. But better still, if they are struggling, if I walk into my restaurant, they are struggling, I'm prepared to roll up my sleeves and work with them. I can serve the fries or make a Big Mac. I'm never going to be as fast as them because they're mostly young people. But they will respect you more because you are standing head to shoulder with them doing what they are doing. So therefore, it's very important to have a good shadow of a leader. You cannot tell your team member to say, you cannot say to them, do as I say, not do as I do. So if you want to lead, you need to really lead with an example. Now, with family businesses, the first generation obviously have done everything. They have started the business from ground floor upwards. I'm not in my second generation yet, so I do not know how my second generation will deal. But what I have taken steps, so make sure that my second generation doesn't come into, not parachute drop into my business. So my son who is here, I have asked him, I said, no, I do not want you to get involved in my business. Because if he does come into my business, my staff are not going to give him a hard time. My staff going to wrap him in a cotton wool. He's not going to learn the hard way. He will not know what it is like paying the wages end of the month, what it is like paying your VAT when it's due, what it's like having a good cash flow. So I said, there's some money, go and do something what you want to do. And that's the best way to learn. So therefore, it's a responsibility of first generation to make sure the second generation is prepared to take the business forward rather than taking it back. That means they have to do everything, learn everything, with on their hands and knees, and then move forward, rather than being dropped into a situation whereby they're surrounded by big advisors, and then they advise you what to do, and you really lost. You do not know what is the right thing to do.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, I started as an unpaid intern, and I worked in all different aspects of the business. And one of my biggest fears when I joined was that people would think I'm there just because of who I am and not because of what I brought to the table. So I worked really hard. I mean, I was on work sites from 6 a.m. to 7 p.m. and, well, probably later than that, 9 p.m. But, I think when you are then a member of the next generation, it's hard to find a balance between trying to be a leader and a manager, but doing it in a very respectful way, and also, not stepping on anyone's toes. You're often given big responsibilities at a young age, and you're managing teams of people that are much more experienced than you and older than you. And so I think the way to approach it is slightly softer. I mean, I would let them know that they're the ones that are the experienced one. They're the ones that I need help to get this project done. And I think because of that and the way, I was assertive, and as I said before, you're very responsible. So I had a project, I had something I needed to do, but you can do it in a softer way so that it's not stepping on their toes and that it makes them want to help you. I think if you're a bit too assertive or a bit too authoritarian at a young age, it's not going to help you in any way. I think at first, especially when I was younger, there was a much more soft approach to the leadership style. But then as I got older and I went away and did my MBA and I came back and was working more on the investment side of things, I felt like I was being pigeonholed in more feminine roles, and I really didn't want that to happen. I wanted to be multifaceted, and I wanted to be able to do all different aspects of the business. So I think I did take on a bit more of a stereotypically male approach. So I think it's hard to find that balance. And I have to say, coming from an Asian family business, I think there's also a cultural aspect of it, because, for example, if people come for a meeting, or my grandfather's in town, or my father's at the board table, and he's often jet lagged, he travels a lot, I'm happy to get up and get a coffee and a tea and make sure everyone around me is comfortable. And I remember reading the book Lean In by Sheryl Sandberg, and it specifically said, if you're a woman in business, don't do that, because you're going to be seen as more of a secretary and more in this feminine role. But I wouldn't feel comfortable not doing that in my situation. So I think that it's all a balancing act. I think you have to be assertive, and you have to manage the project in front of you, or deal with the problem in front of you, and manage people well. But then you also have to do it respectfully. And I think it's okay to have that balance between masculine and feminine, and know sort of when to play your cards right.
I would say that the second generation, and I always have this debate with my dad, I would say, obviously people like Uncle Atul, and my father and many others started from the ground and made their way upwards and made their success, and made the foundations for future generations take it forward. But I would say that, and please, happy to debate this out, but I would say that it's actually a much harder role for the second generation coming in, because we heard those stats earlier from Anita from the Family Business Place, who said 30% will go through to the next stage, and then it just gets less and less and less, because the boots are just so hard to fill. The expectations are much higher than the expectations that are required in the corporate world. Certainly in my own case, when I came into the family business, I started at 10 years old, and back then we only had a small B&B just outside Heathrow, and I was told to come in every single day of my school holidays, no break at all, because my dad wanted me to learn the hard way. Fair enough. Every parent has different expectations of their kids and what they want, and the way that they want them to grow and nurture and groom them. But that was my role, coming in, cleaning the bathrooms, learning right from the bottom, so that when it was time for me to come to the family business, I was well respected, in the sense that, back to what Atul said, that you need to know your business A to Z. If you don't know it, you won't make a success of it. You need to know not just what it does, but the people that work in it, the numbers, etc. I came in at a very early stage, so that respect was built year after year after year. So when I finally joined the board 2 years ago, after doing a few years in the corporate world, it made life much easier, because the respect was there. Even now, I'll always make sure that in the mornings I come in much earlier than my dad, much earlier than the CFO, and I leave also later than them, even if it's 5 minutes after. But with that, you honestly get so much more respect from your peers. It's extremely difficult proving yourself in a family business, proving yourself to your father, your shareholders, the board, when the business is so large. We're going to have nearly 20 hotels next year, and like I said, just under 4,000 employees. And stepping into those boots whenever the right time is, it's my father built the business, but it's actually more of a risk managing that portfolio, going through to the next stage. I'm very positive, very driven. I'm not trying to sell myself right now to all of you, but you've just got to be really passionate about what you do. And I think that was one of the things. Not just my dad wanted me to build up the respect amongst my peers, he also wanted me to grow that passion for the hospitality business, which I really have. I thrive. I love going into all of our hotels. I love now what he used to do. He used to go pick a windowsill and see if there's any dust there, make sure the housekeeper cleans it, because he has an attention to detail. Even on a daily basis, whether on holiday or when we're here, his favorite app on his iPhone is TripAdvisor. He is obsessed with TripAdvisor because he has said, and he set the company target, that all 16 of our current hotels, he wants them to be in the top 3, because that's what makes him happy. And that's what makes him get up in the morning, wake up and say, I've got a great business and great leaders behind my business. So, it's going to be challenging, but you have to take that leap forward once in your life. I think if you've got a great father, a great mentor, you've got great people around you, you can make that leap as a team. You don't need to do it by yourself. You need to be a team member, and that can make life much, much easier going into the future.
Well, I also joined our family business at the age of 10, and I think I've had a similar experience with as Sanjay, although I would often not leave 5 minutes after, probably 2 minutes after, to be honest with you. Far less hard working than Sanjay. And I very much also see it as a generational sort of issue. I'm now second generation. I know there are others in my community where they're onto the third generation, and I think what I am seeing now is obviously they've come into a much more comfortable situation. They weren't working those long hours that your dad and my parents will have worked, where you're literally busting a gut. You're working all the hours that is being sent to you, and you're not sort of watching TV or doing all those sort of things. And I know that generationally that has changed a little bit. There are people that I know who have basically inherited their family businesses, and they are living slightly more comfortable lives, whether that's materially or in the workplace. And I think what we have to do is really show that actually that authentic leadership that has driven us to such great success needs to be retained if these great businesses are to continue into the future. And I think what Atul said about having that really authentic, ground level, grassroots sort of experience is incredibly important if this sort of very great success story of the British economy is going to continue. So I think that the expectations are much greater when you're second generation. You're trying to emulate superhuman efforts from the first generation, and often that is a big challenge, and you do have to work much harder, but actually it's hard work that needs to be done if these businesses are going to continue.
Thank you. May I invite the audience to comment or ask questions of the panel on any of the things that they have mentioned?
Thank you, Paul Sahota. Really interesting conversation. I think, I remember with my dad's business, I was about 10 or 11 when he used to wake me up at 5 a.m. because the paper boy hadn't turned up, and I had to go out and deliver the papers in the rain. But good grounding, nevertheless, good grounding. And I was keen on my kids to find a way as well to understand the value of the pound. And I was happy for them to go out to work in Waitrose, and Dylan went out to work in Ryman's. I don't know whether there was any benefit in that, but Ashley advises us on the best gluten-free bread from Waitrose these days, and Dylan says that I need to put lubricant paper in the shredder on a regular basis. But I guess there's a balance to be struck here, isn't there? I came across a kid recently in some of the charity work that I do. And, his dad is a very wealthy man, and this kid is very broken. He's been, and it's because he says to me that it's because there's, a huge expectation on him. And, his dad is so successful, the boots are just huge in terms of, him trying to emulate his father. And so he's kind of stepped out of it for a while, just to get himself together. So, I'm very conscious with my own children that I don't push them to breaking point. I really like the point, Sanjay, around your dad saying, don't make the same mistakes, make some new ones. That's a really good, a good lesson for us all, I think. And I love, Atul, the fact that you've created an environment for your son to express himself in, risk-free. Without any expectations. I think it's commendable, and those are the points that I wanted to make. Thank you.
Another great discussion for the last session. I would say it's interesting, Alicia, you said that you use the word intern for your family business. I think the rest of the panel, especially for me, coming from family business, it wasn't less interning, more cheap labour. But one of the things I've always said is that I would never join the hospitality business that my family set up. And the only reason I'd set up a Chinese restaurant is to give my kids work experience, so they have the same opportunities, in inverted commas, that I did when I was a young kid growing up. But now that I have a young family, I'm asking myself, well, how? And we don't run that type of business. But I'm asking myself, well, what age should I involve them in the business? So my question to the panel is, now that you've had your experiences of growing up in the business, what age will you have your children join your business? Or not necessarily join, but just get experience?
Please.
Well, I obviously, when I had a small business, my daughter, when she was studying, doing A-level, I would ask her to come in. I couldn't afford a secretary, so she'll come and type all my letters over the weekends, and then we send it out on Monday. And as a result, when she did her A-level, she took IT as one subject, and she did incredibly well, thanks to the training. And when my son was 13, I invited him to come to work at McDonald's. And he worked at McDonald's, and it really did him a lot of good. I never paid him. I paid him in different ways, but he would come, and so he was obviously very young at 13. He was not allowed to work in the kitchen, so he'll work on the drive-through. And the first few days, he'll say, "Oh, my customer is waiting. Can I have my food, please?" And within 3-4 weeks, he will say, "My customer is waiting. Can I have my Big Mac, please?" And suddenly made him a very, very outgoing and confident young man. And then he worked in all the different areas in McDonald's. And then I thought, okay, this is the time for him to, while he was studying, to do something else. Now, it is, as Sanjay said and Alan said, it is very difficult for second generation to fill those boots. And there are some reasons for it, because obviously they see so I know Sanjay's illustrious father, he's done very well. Well, obviously, Sanjay will look up to him. My father started here, and look where he's reached. So obviously, there's a big expectation of Sanjay to do just that. So that's one challenge. And secondly, sometimes the second generation, I'm not saying it applies to Sanjay, he's a lovely boy and I know him and he works very hard, but sometimes second generation, they had it so easy that they do not have a fire in their belly. They do not have the killing instincts to go out and do it and take those risks. Now, the reason they can't take those risks is because the risk of losing, because they could think, oh, my dad has been so successful, but little do they know that to get to that success, my father has made many mistakes. My father has had many pitfalls, and therefore, so he has come through. So they are very afraid. The second generation has a lot of, they are afraid to make the mistakes and be judged on those mistakes. So that's one issue. Second issue is some second generation do not have the fire in the belly simply because they haven't seen the hardship. Because we had to work to bring food to the table. They don't have those challenges. And then thirdly, obviously, the burden or expectation is very high. So I feel, I sympathize with the second generation. Yes, they have a big mountain to climb.
Just to follow on from that, actually, I think it's an interesting point, and I think, seeing my father work so hard, I think was definitely inspiration. And actually was hearing about, our family, my father's family were thrown out of Uganda in 1972. I think someone was talking about that earlier. And, they were refugees and started with nothing. And hearing that story and hearing about how he started with one hotel and then a second and finally got a Holiday Inn franchise and, built it from the US and Canada, moved into Europe, moved into Japan, hearing that story was actually what inspired me to want to join. So I think, yes, I think there are huge boots to fill, but I think hearing that story and having that inspiration is really important. And I wonder how that how to carry that on. I'm still thinking about that. If you have any ideas, please let me know. But to answer your question about the age, I think my brother, who's actually here today, would have a differing view from me, because he had quite a lot of pressure to join the business, and he was, I don't know if he was asked to work in the business or told to, but he did it a lot younger than I did. And I started at 14, I think, at my first operations rotation. So I don't think there's a right age. I think it's more the motivation behind it. I think I didn't have pressure to join the business, so I wanted to do it. And I think it should be in that way, and not as sort of a forced, you should be doing this, because I think we as children can be stubborn. So.
As we're on the topic of diversity, whenever the happy moment is when I'm blessed with children, I was, for example, at a very young age, brought into the business, like I said, at 10 years old, scrubbing the toilets of our first B&B. But going back to your question, whenever I have kids, and hopefully I have one of each, that'll be me being very lucky, I want to promote diversity in my home place as well, saying, that it's not just a man's role to take on a family business. I would like, if I have 2 girls, 3 girls, whatever, I don't care. If they've got the right skill set, more than happy for them to take the family business to the next stage. Of course, if they want that, I won't force them. So, number one, promoting that at home can help, because it shouldn't just be culturally within Asian businesses. There's a son, they automatically see that son as a successor of the father or the uncle of the grandfather. That's not the way it should be. Certainly, the way I want to take my life forward is to say that, if I have a daughter, you can do it as well. It's all there for grabs. Whoever's the better person, may the best person win. Get on with it, yeah? But when it comes down to age, I don't think there's a definitive number. I think it's purely the day that you can drag them into the business. Because one thing I learned, of course, I hated going in on my summer holidays. It was the 2-3 months a year where all my kids were playing. All my friends were playing out, in the parks and doing all the fun stuff, going to Thorpe Park, doing all the really, really fun stuff. I couldn't do that, but now I actually put my hands together and I thank my father, because if he hadn't given me that initial grounding to be able to scrub a toilet, to be able to, to communicate with our staff effectively, and being humble about the way that you speak to your colleagues and friends and board members and all of that, I don't think I'd be here today. So I think the younger that you get them in, the better, is my opinion, because I certainly learned from it. And also with us being the second generation and them obviously coming into a family which has a silver spoon automatically, because they don't have to struggle like my father and Atul when they first started the business. I think the quicker that you can get them to being humble and working under very, very tough circumstances, the better. That's certainly what I would do one day if I have children.
Yes, my dad also believed in the sort of cheap labour internship, which I think wouldn't be allowed today. But I think there isn't a definitive time. It's really about when it feels right and when young people have motivations. I was always interested in my family business, so I was very keen to be involved. But I think Sanjay's got a really good point about the younger the better, because I very much remember that as I was growing up, as I was sort of getting into my teens, I was interested in sort of video games, and my dad sort of pointedly refused to buy me what was then a Nintendo Entertainment System. Obviously old technology now, but it was a threshold watershed moment where I just had to just do work, basically. I wasn't allowed to play computer games, go to the park and do all this sort of stuff. So I think the younger you get involved, the fewer distractions you have, the more sort of humility you build, and actually the stronger your track record when you get to the age of 16 and you can have to demand a bit of salary.
Thank you, Alan. One final question, because we've run out of time.
Hi, so I am working in my family business at the moment, and it's exactly what Alicia, you said. Tanzania property, came to London, started from one bed and breakfast, made it, and I actually think our families might know each other. But the word that I kind of keep hearing is father, And I'm lucky enough to be from a business that is solely women-led. The matriarch is a woman. She competed against a lot of men. She went through a lot of hardship, and I'm very lucky to have learned from her, but I was kind of wondering, why is it so common that the leader of Asian businesses is male?
It's not just Asian businesses,
Yeah.
though. It's across the board, but panel?
It's not necessarily the case. I have some friends where where the leader is a female member who have actually, maybe they have tragic circumstances, the male member or the father passed away, so mother took over that role. But traditionally in Asian families, so father generally takes the role of the breadwinner and mother takes the role of making the family, and they actually have a much harder role actually than the fathers do. But yes, I take your point, but generally it's traditionally this is what Asian families have done. But I think it's changing now. The women are taking more active role. Women are taking equal role. I can clearly say that in my daughter's case. She's a doctor. Her husband is a doctor. They both are ambitious. They both have now become consultants. They both want to bring in money, and they both want to do better in their careers. So it is changing, and I think sooner it changes, the better it is.
And I think Sanjay already alluded to that earlier in his remarks, that he wants to see that equality at home, coming up from home. So, fingers crossed, we are in a different generation. And I'd like to conclude. I mean, can we all please give a round of applause to our panel